welcome to our deep dive into self-discipline, and not just the, you know, try harder kind of. We're going deeper than that today,
Yeah.
like way beyond the surface, and we're exploring the actual science behind it. Thanks to excerpts from Peter Hollins' book, The Science of Self-Discipline.
Yeah, great book.
We got some really interesting stuff to cover today.
Yeah, we do.
It turns out self-discipline is a lot more than just willpower.
Right.
We're going to be uncovering what's happening in your brain, like when you resist temptation,
Yeah.
how to train your discipline muscle,
Mm-hmm.
and even some tricks from Navy SEALs to push past your limits.
Love it.
Oh, and get this. We'll also tackle why chimpanzees actually beat humans in one discipline test.
Oh, that's a good one.
You ready to dive in?
Let's do it.
Okay, I'm ready. So I want to start with the brain stuff.
Okay.
I've always wondered this, like, can scientists actually see what's happening when we're trying to be disciplined?
You know, it's interesting you say that because believe it or not, they can. Yeah, they can. Using something called fMRI imaging, researchers can actually watch specific parts of your brain light up when you're exercising self-control.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah, and one of the key areas is the prefrontal cortex.
Okay, I heard of that. What does that do again?
So think of it as your brain's CEO, right? It's responsible for all the important stuff like planning and decision-making and, yes, resisting those tempting impulses.
Okay, so that's where that battle between, eat the cookie or stick with the fruit plays out.
Exactly. That's where it all goes down.
Interesting.
It's like your prefrontal cortex is working overtime to help you make that disciplined choice.
So interesting.
Yeah, and another fascinating area is the ventral medial prefrontal cortex.
Okay.
This region gets involved when you're weighing immediate rewards versus those that come later.
Oh, so that's like choosing to go for a run now for long-term fitness, over that instant gratification of like watching another episode on Netflix.
Exactly. That's a great example.
So there's actually a biological basis for, this struggle.
There is, yeah.
But if these areas of the brain are responsible for self-control, does that mean we can actually train them to get better?
Absolutely. The more you practice making disciplined choices, the stronger those neural pathways become.
Wow.
Your brain literally adapts to become better at self-control, just like a muscle gets stronger with exercise.
So it's like hitting the gym for your willpower.
Precisely.
I like that.
But just like any muscle, it can get tired too. That's where willpower fatigue comes in.
Okay. Yeah, I've definitely felt that before.
Yeah, it's a real thing. Willpower is a finite resource, and if we use it up on lots of small choices throughout the day, we're more likely to give in to temptation later on.
So we have to be strategic about how we use our willpower.
Yes, definitely.
That makes sense. So understanding this fatigue is important for learning how to, conserve our willpower.
Right.
But what about motivation? How do we fuel that discipline muscle in the first place?
Mm-hmm.
The book had some surprising insights about what really drives us.
Yes, and this is where a lot of people get it wrong, even managers.
Really?
Yeah. You'd think money would be the top motivator, right?
Yeah, that's what I would have thought.
But research has actually revealed something else entirely.
What is it?
Studies show that the feeling of making progress is what truly motivates people.
Really?
It's that sense of getting better at something, not just chasing a paycheck.
The book mentioned that 95% of managers actually got this wrong.
Yeah, it's pretty shocking.
So it's not just about those external rewards, it's more about that internal sense of accomplishment.
Exactly. And this ties directly to self-discipline. You're more likely to stick with something if it's connected to a sense of mastery, autonomy, or purpose. That feeling of, having control over your choices and actions and knowing that your efforts are contributing to something meaningful.
Yeah, if you feel like you're growing and improving, the effort suddenly feels worth it.
Right.
It's no longer just about forcing yourself. It's about, getting better at something that matters to you.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense. And one interesting point the author made was about how he had to force himself to eat more to gain weight.
I remember that.
It seems kind of counterintuitive, but it illustrates how discomfort is often necessary to achieve our goals.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point.
So sometimes discipline isn't about denying ourselves pleasure. It's about pushing through the discomfort of doing things we don't want to do in the moment for the sake of our long-term goals.
Precisely. Whether it's, eating more, working out, or tackling a challenging task growth, often lies on the other side of discomfort.
That is so true. Okay, so speaking of pushing through discomfort, I'm ready for some inspiration.
Okay.
The book mentioned the Navy SEALs and their 40% rule.
Oh, yeah.
Can you tell me more about that?
Absolutely. So the 40% rule is a powerful mental tool used by Navy SEALs to overcome their perceived limits. It states that when your mind tells you you're done, You've actually only tapped into about 40% of your true capacity.
Wait, so that feeling of, I can't do this anymore, is basically a lie our brains tell us.
In a way, yes. Our minds tend to give up long before our bodies do.
Wow.
The 40% rule is about pushing through that initial wall of pain, that voice that says stop, and realizing you have so much more in you.
That's powerful. But how do you actually do that?
Yeah.
How do you convince your brain to keep going when it's screaming for mercy?
It's all about shifting your belief. You know, the 40% rule isn't just a motivational phrase, it's actually backed by science.
Really?
It ties into the placebo effect, the idea that our belief about something can actually impact our physical abilities.
So it's like those studies where people lift more weight when they think they've had caffeine, even if it's just a placebo.
Exactly. Your mind is incredibly powerful. If you believe you can push further, you often can. And with the 40% rule, it's about training yourself to recognize that initial feeling of I'm done
Yeah.
as a signal to dig deeper, not to give up.
Oh, I like that. Okay, I'm feeling motivated. But let's be honest, we all self-sabotage sometimes.
But do.
The book talked about these discipline drainers, those sneaky things that hold us back without us even realizing it. Can you walk me through some of the top culprits?
Of course. One common trap is the false hope syndrome.
What is that?
This is that tendency to set overly ambitious goals. You know, thinking we can make drastic changes overnight,
Yeah.
like going from couch potato to marathon runner in a month.
Right.
But this just sets us up for failure and discouragement.
Yeah, that makes sense. So instead of setting ourselves up for, a crash and burn scenario, we should focus on smaller, more achievable wins.
Precisely. It's about setting realistic expectations and focusing on consistency over intensity, especially in the beginning. Think baby steps, not giant leaps.
Okay, that makes sense.
Uh.
What about another common discipline drainer?
Another sneaky one is procrastination disguised as perfectionism.
Oh,
We often put things off, waiting for the perfect time or for everything to be just right, but that often leads to never actually starting.
I'm definitely guilty of that one.
Yeah.
I'll often get stuck in the planning phase trying to make everything perfect before I even begin.
That's where the 75% rule can be helpful.
What's that?
The idea is to act when you're about 75% sure you're ready, instead of waiting for 100% certainty, because that often never comes.
So it's about embracing good enough over the, paralyzing pursuit of perfect.
Exactly. It's about accepting that there will always be some uncertainty and choosing to move forward anyway.
That's a great mindset shift.
Yes.
What's another discipline drainer we should be aware of?
This one is particularly insidious, the rationalizing past good deeds trap.
What's that?
It's that tendency to think, well, I was good yesterday, so I can slack off today.
Oh, I do that all the time. Like I'll say, I worked out this morning, so bring on the pizza.
We all have our moments. But this mindset undermines our progress because each moment, each choice is a fresh start.
Right.
We can't bank our past good deeds as an excuse to be less disciplined now.
It's so true. It's like trying to use yesterday's gym membership to get into the movies today. It doesn't work that way.
Right.
What about one final discipline drainer to watch out for?
This one is called Parkinson's Law. It states that work expands to fill the time allotted to it. So if you give yourself a week to complete a task that could be done in 2 days, you'll probably end up taking the whole week.
Oh, wow. So less time actually equals more discipline.
It can.
That seems counterintuitive.
It can be. By setting tight deadlines, we force ourselves to focus, prioritize, and work more efficiently. It's a way to hack our brains into being more disciplined by limiting the time we have to procrastinate.
Interesting. So instead of giving myself a week to finish that project, maybe I should aim for 2 days and see what happens.
It's definitely worth experimenting with. The key is to be realistic, but also a bit ambitious with your deadlines, pushing yourself just outside your comfort zone.
That's a great segue into our next topic, getting comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Okay.
The book introduces this concept called urge surfing.
Oh, yeah.
Can you explain what that is and why it's so effective?
Absolutely. So urge surfing is a mindfulness technique for dealing with cravings and temptations. The idea isn't to fight the urge, but to ride it like a wave.
Okay, so instead of trying to suppress the urge, we're supposed to just observe it.
Yeah.
That seems almost too simple.
It can feel counterintuitive, but that's what makes it so effective. Yeah. Resisting an urge directly often makes it stronger.
Yeah,
It's like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. It just pops up with even more force.
I could see that.
But by observing the urge without judgment, noticing the sensations in your body and how they change over time, it loses its power.
It's like watching a wave crest and then break. It's a temporary phenomenon.
Precisely. Urge surfing is about recognizing that urges are like waves. They rise, peak, and then subside on their own.
But to surf that wave, You need to get better at handling discomfort in general, right?
Right.
Not just when it comes to cravings, but in all areas of life.
Absolutely. That's where building your discomfort muscle comes in.
Okay.
The book suggests some interesting tactics like rejection therapy.
Rejection therapy. That sounds intimidating.
Yeah.
What's that all about?
It's about intentionally putting yourself in situations where you might be rejected. Asking for a discount, you know you won't get striking up conversations with strangers, anything that pushes you outside your social comfort zone.
So it's like exposure therapy for awkwardness.
Exactly. The more you practice facing those fears, the less power they have over you. And the more comfortable you become with discomfort in general, the easier it becomes to handle those urges and temptations when they arise.
I'm starting to see a theme here.
Mm.
Self-discipline is as much about training your mind as it is about, building habits and taking action.
Mm-hmm.
But speaking of action, let's talk about the role our environment plays in all of this.
Okay.
We often underestimate how much our surroundings affect our discipline.
We do. It's not just about willpower. It's about setting yourself up for success by creating an environment that supports your goals.
So it's about minimizing distractions.
Right.
My phone constantly buzzing with notifications is definitely not conducive to focus.
Exactly. Out of sight, out of mind is a powerful strategy. That means, putting your phone away, silencing notifications, decluttering your workspace, anything that removes those tempting distractions from your immediate environment.
It's like creating a discipline-friendly zone.
Yes.
What other tactics does the book recommend for building that optimal environment?
There's an intriguing technique called the fishbowl.
The fishbowl. I'm picturing goldfish, but I'm guessing it's not about that.
Not quite, but it
Yeah.
is about tapping into our love of rewards.
Okay.
So the fishbowl is basically a game you can play with yourself to make tasks more enjoyable. You write down small rewards on slips of paper, put them in a bowl, and then pick one out after completing a certain amount of work or reaching a specific milestone.
So it's like turning your to-do list into a game show.
Yeah, kind of.
What kind of rewards are we talking about here?
Anything that motivates you. It could be a 15-minute break, watching a funny video, enjoying a healthy snack.
Yeah.
Anything that gives you a little dopamine hit and makes you associate that task with something positive.
So this actually works. People are more likely to stick with something if they know there's a fun reward waiting for them.
Research suggests it can make a big difference, especially for tasks we find challenging or tedious.
Yeah.
It taps into our natural reward system and makes us more likely to repeat the behavior.
That's cool. What's another environmental hack we can use to boost our self-discipline?
This one's all about making healthy choices, the easy choices, defaulting to positive actions. The idea is to structure your environment so that the path of least resistance leads to the actions you want to encourage.
Can you give me some examples of how to do that?
Absolutely. Let's talk about food, for example.
Yeah.
If you want to eat healthier snacks, keep a bowl of fruit on your counter and pre-cut veggies in your fridge.
Okay.
Make it easy to grab those instead of reaching for the chips.
So it's about making those healthy choices more visually appealing and accessible.
Exactly. Or think about hydration.
Okay.
Keep a refillable water bottle on your desk and make it a habit to refill it throughout the day.
Making it harder to choose those sugary drinks.
Precisely. The idea is to create an environment that supports your goals by minimizing temptations and making those positive actions the most effortless options.
So we're not just relying on willpower. We're strategically designing our surroundings to work for us.
Exactly.
All this talk about healthy choices has me thinking about a classic experiment, the marshmallow test.
Ah, yes. A timeless study on delayed gratification. It's incredibly relevant to our discussion on self-discipline.
It really highlights how the ability to delay gratification can be a game changer, even for adults.
Yeah, it's a powerful skill.
It's like choosing to invest in your future self instead of getting that instant hit of pleasure.
Mhm.
But how does this translate to everyday life? What are some examples of delaying gratification that can lead to those long-term wins?
It could be choosing to work on that important project instead of, scrolling through social media, hitting the gym instead of hitting the snooze button, or saving for retirement instead of splurging on that impulse buy.
So it's about making those choices that align with our long-term goals, even when they're not the most fun or immediately rewarding options in the moment.
Exactly. It's about building that mental muscle that allows us to delay gratification and reap those bigger rewards down the line.
Okay, I'm feeling inspired to resist my next marshmallow.
Good.
But let's get practical for a second.
Hmm.
What happens when temptation strikes and our willpower is weak?
Yeah.
What are some strategies we can use in those moments?
So the book provides some great questions to ask yourself in those moments of weakness.
Okay.
Questions that can help you snap back into alignment with your goals.
I'm all about arming myself for those willpower battles.
Uh,
What's the first question we should ask when temptation rears its ugly head?
the first question is designed to cut through the mental clutter and force a clear decision. Do I want to be disciplined? Yes or no?
I like that. Such a simple yet powerful question.
Yeah.
No gray areas, no excuses.
Right.
It requires a definitive yes or no answer.
Exactly. It forces you to confront your choice and take ownership of your actions. No more waffling or rationalizing. You're either choosing to be disciplined in this moment or you're not.
Okay, it's a great first line of defense. What's the second question we can use to combat those tempting urges?
The second question shines a light on our tendency to choose the easy path over the right one. Am I doing the right thing or the easy thing?
That's a good one. It's so easy to convince ourselves that what we want to do is also the right thing to do.
Our brains are masters of justification. But this question cuts through those excuses and forces us to confront the reality of our choices. Are we choosing the path that aligns with our goals and values, or are we taking the easy way out?
Sometimes the right thing is the easy thing, but this question helps us check ourselves and make sure we're not just giving into temptation disguised as self-care or whatever other excuse we've come up with.
Right.
All right, loving these reality check questions. What's the third question we should ask ourselves when willpower is waning?
The third question connects us back to our why, reminding us of the long-term payoff we're working towards. What's my desert?
Oh, I love that analogy. It's like, okay, if I resist this temptation now, what amazing reward awaits me later?
Precisely. It's a way to shift our focus from the immediate gratification to the bigger picture. It helps you tap into your motivation and remember why the struggle is worth it.
So instead of focusing on what I'm giving up, I'm reminding myself of what I'm gaining.
Exactly.
Okay, give me that final willpower boosting question.
The final question brings it all back to self-awareness. Am I being self-aware?
So crucial, because sometimes we slip into those bad habits without even realizing it.
Precisely. This question is a mindfulness check-in. It prompts us to pause and assess our current state. Are we present and engaged in this choice, or are we mindlessly giving in to temptation?
It's like hitting the pause button on autopilot and taking back control of the wheel.
Exactly. Self-awareness is key to breaking free from those unconscious patterns and making conscious, intentional choices that align with our goals.
Wow, these 4 questions are like little willpower ninjas. I'm definitely adding those to my mental toolkit.
Good.
But let's talk about the real secret sauce of self-discipline habits.
Ah, yes. Motivation gets all the hype, but habits are where it's at.
It's true. Motivation is fleeting, but habits are those automatic behaviors that run on autopilot.
Think of habits as automatic self-discipline.
No.
They take the effort out of making the right choices because those choices become ingrained in your routine.
Okay, so how do we actually build those rock-solid habits that make self-discipline almost effortless?
Research provides a helpful starting point. It takes on average about 66 days to form a new habit.
66 days, huh? That's doable.
It is.
It's not about overnight transformations, it's about consistency over time.
Exactly. The key is to start small, build gradually, and be patient with yourself.
Any tips for making that habit-building process a little smoother?
One of the most important things is to choose habits that are actually enjoyable or at least tolerable for you.
Yeah, because if you hate running, forcing yourself to run every day, probably won't lead to lasting change, right?
Exactly. Start with something you actually look forward to, or at least don't dread. It's about finding what works for you and making it a sustainable part of your life.
Makes sense.
Hmm.
But even with enjoyable habits, there's that initial hump to get over, right?
Absolutely.
Like when you first start doing it.
Yeah, and one of the most important things to remember is that new habits often feel wrong at first.
Wait, what? Why would something good feel wrong?
Because our brains are wired to resist change. When we introduce something new, it disrupts our established patterns, and our brains interpret that disruption as a threat.
So it's like our brains are saying, hey, this isn't how we usually do things.
Exactly. And that can lead to feelings of discomfort, resistance, or even fear.
Oh, wow. So how do we push past that initial this feels wrong feeling and stick with the new habit?
By embracing the discomfort,
Yeah.
acknowledge that it's a natural part of the process and keep going anyway. Over time, as you repeat the new behavior, those neural pathways strengthen, the resistance fades, and the habit becomes more automatic.
Wow, we've covered so much ground already. The science of self-discipline, the power of motivation, those sneaky discipline drainers, and now the importance of building habits.
That's a lot.
And we're just getting started.
I know.
So,
In the next part of our deep dive, we'll explore even more practical tactics and mindset shifts to help you master this essential skill.
mhm.
But before we wrap up this first part, let's take a look at these 6 sources of influence that affect our habits.
Okay.
The book mentions this framework, and it really got me thinking.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Mhm.
The 6 sources of influence can help us understand how external factors impact our self-discipline.
Exactly.
It's like having a secret decoder ring for understanding why we do what we do. We'll dive into this framework in more detail in the next part, but for now I'll leave you with this. Think about how your social circle or environment might be helping or hindering your self-discipline without you even realizing it.
It's a good question.
It's something to ponder as we move on to part 2.
Yeah.
Until then, happy disciplining.
Yes, happy disciplining. Welcome back to our deep dive into the science of self-discipline.
So I'm excited to get into these 6 sources of influence.
Yeah, me too. It's a really fascinating framework.
Yeah, it sounds like it can give us some real insight into why we do the things we do,
Absolutely.
and maybe even, help us figure out how to make some positive changes.
Yeah, definitely. The beauty of this model is that it helps us see that self-discipline isn't just about willpower.
Right.
It's about strategically aligning all these influences to support our goals. It's
Yep.
like having a whole team working for you instead of just going it alone.
Oh, I like that. So it's not just about those internal battles we fight with ourselves. It's also about setting up our external world to work for us.
Precisely. It's about creating an environment where self-control becomes almost effortless because everything around us is nudging us in the right direction.
Okay, let's break down these 6 sources of influence.
Uh-huh.
Where do we even begin?
So the model divides these influences into 3 main categories:
Okay.
personal, social, and structural.
Okay, so we're looking at influences that come from within ourselves,
Yeah.
from the people around us, and from our environment.
That's exactly.
Okay, I like it. Let's start with the personal influences,
Okay.
which are all about, our own motivation and ability.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is the inner game of self-discipline.
Yeah.
What are the key factors that determine our personal motivation?
It comes down to a few things: how badly we want to achieve something, how meaningful that goal is to us, and whether it aligns with our values. If we're not truly invested in the goal, it's going to be much harder to muster up the self-discipline to achieve it.
Right. I've definitely experienced that before. If I'm not passionate about something,
Yeah.
it's much easier to give up when things get tough.
Right.
But even if we have the motivation, we also need the ability, right?
Yeah.
We need to actually be capable of achieving the goal.
Yeah, absolutely. Personal ability is about having the skills, knowledge, and resources to make it happen. If our goal is to write a novel, but we've never written anything longer than a grocery list, we're going to need to develop some writing skills.
Right. It's like having all the ingredients for a cake, but not knowing how to bake it.
Yeah.
You might have the desire, but you need the skills to make it happen.
Exactly. You need both the motivation and the ability to succeed.
So that's personal influence,
Yes.
motivation, and ability.
Mm-hmm.
What about social influence?
Okay.
How do the people in our lives affect our self-discipline?
Our social circle can have a huge impact on our efforts to be more disciplined.
Yeah,
They can either support us or sabotage us sometimes without us even realizing it.
I can see that. We're social creatures, and we're constantly influenced by the people we spend time with.
Precisely. And just like personal influence, social influence can be broken down into motivation and ability.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So what does social motivation look like in action?
Okay.
How can our relationships help us stay motivated?
Well, it's about having people in your life who encourage and support your goals, who hold you accountable, and who maybe even join you on the journey.
So it's like having a team of cheerleaders in your corner.
Exactly. That positive reinforcement from others can be incredibly motivating. Knowing that people believe in you and are rooting for you can make a big difference.
Yeah. But what if the people in our lives aren't so supportive? What if they're constantly tempting us with things that undermine our goals?
That's where things can get tricky. If you're trying to eat healthy, but your friends always want to meet up for pizza and ice cream, it's going to be much harder to stay on track.
Yeah. So it's important to surround ourselves with people who share our values and support our goal.
Absolutely. And it's not about cutting people out of our lives, but maybe about being more selective about how we spend our time and who we engage with.
I like that. What about social ability?
Okay.
How do our social connections influence our capacity to be disciplined?
Well, social ability is about having access to people who can provide guidance, mentorship, or even practical support.
Oh, so it's about having people in your life who can teach you new skills or offer advice based on their experience.
Yes, exactly. Think about it like this. If you're trying to learn a new language, Having a friend who's fluent can be incredibly helpful.
Right.
They can offer tips, practice with you, and encourage you along the way.
So social connections can not only motivate us, but they can also equip us with the skills and knowledge we need to achieve our goals.
Precisely.
Okay, so we've covered personal influence
Mm-hmm.
and social influence.
Right.
What about that third category, structural influence?
Okay.
How does our environment play into all of this?
So structural influence is all about the environment we create for ourselves,
Yeah.
how we design our surroundings to either enable or disable self-control. It's about setting ourselves up for success by making those desired behaviors easier and those undesired behaviors harder.
So it's not just about who we surround ourselves with, but it's also about how we structure our physical space, our routines, our systems.
Exactly. And just like the other categories, structural influence can be broken down into motivation and ability.
Okay, let's start with structural motivation.
Yeah.
How can we design our environment to keep ourselves motivated?
It's about creating systems that reward positive behavior and discourage negative behavior.
Oh, so it's like building in incentives and consequences to help us stay on track.
Exactly. We can use rewards to make those challenging tasks more appealing, and we can use consequences to make those tempting but undesirable behaviors less so.
Okay, can you give me some examples of how to do that?
Sure. Let's say you're trying to save money.
Right.
You could set up a system where you reward yourself with a small treat or experience after reaching a certain savings goal.
Okay.
Or on the flip side, you could have a consequence where you donate money to a cause you don't support if you overspend.
Oh, those are clever ideas. So we're basically hacking our brains to make those desired behaviors more appealing and those undesired behaviors less so.
Precisely.
Okay. What about structural ability? How does our environment influence our capacity for self-control?
Structural ability is about having reminders, cues, and tools in place that make it easier to make those disciplined choices. It's about removing obstacles and paving the way for success.
So it's about making those desired behaviors the path of least resistance.
Exactly. For example, if you want to eat healthier, you could keep a bowl of fruit on your counter and pre-cut veggies in your fridge, making those healthy options more visible and accessible. Or if you want to drink more water, you can keep a refillable water bottle on your desk and set reminders on your phone to drink throughout the day.
So it's about anticipating those moments of weakness and setting up systems that make it easier to stay on track.
Exactly. It's like having a built-in support system that's always there to guide you in the right direction.
Okay, so we've covered the 6 sources of influence: personal motivation and ability,
Yeah.
social motivation and ability, and structural motivation and ability. That's a lot to think about.
It is a lot.
But how do we actually apply this framework in our lives? How do we use it to improve our self-discipline?
That's a great question. The real power of this model comes from understanding how all these influences interact and how we can strategically align them to support our goals. It's about taking a holistic approach to self-discipline, recognizing that it's not just about willpower, but about creating a supportive ecosystem that sets us up for success.
So it's not about just focusing on one area. It's about looking at the big picture and making sure all these influences are working for us, not against us.
Exactly. And that requires a bit of self-reflection and honesty. We need to be willing to look at our lives and see where we might be unknowingly sabotaging our own efforts.
Right. Can you give me an example of what that might look like?
Sure. Let's say your goal is to get more sleep. You've got the personal motivation. You really want to feel more rested and energized, and you've even got the ability, you should be going to bed earlier.
Okay.
But you keep finding yourself staying up late scrolling through your phone or watching TV.
Oh, yeah. Like I've all been there.
Yeah, we have.
So what's going on in that situation? Where's the disconnect?
It could be a social influence. Maybe your partner stays up late and you feel pressured to stay up with them, or maybe your friends are constantly texting you late at night, making it hard to wind down.
Or maybe it's a structural influence.
Yeah.
Maybe my bedroom isn't set up for optimal sleep.
Yeah,
The TV is on my phone is buzzing, and there are piles of clutter everywhere.
exactly. So even though you have the personal motivation and ability to get more sleep, those social and structural influences are working against you.
So it sounds like it's important to identify those specific influences that are hindering our progress. But what can we do to change them? How do we align those social and structural influences to support our goals?
That's where the real work and the real magic begins. It's about becoming aware of those influences, making conscious choices, and taking action to create a more supportive environment.
So in the sleep example, maybe I start by having an honest conversation with my partner about my need for more sleep and see if we can create a shared bedtime routine.
Exactly. Or maybe you set boundaries with your friends, letting them know that you won't be available late at night. And you could create a more sleep-friendly bedroom by removing distractions, dimming the lights, and making sure the temperature is comfortable.
So it's about taking those proactive steps to align those influences with our goals.
Precisely. And it's an ongoing process. As we grow and evolve, so do our goals, and we need to continually reassess those 6 sources of influence to make sure they're still supporting us.
Right, because what worked for us last year might not work for us now.
Exactly. Our lives are constantly changing, and we need to be adaptable in how we approach self-discipline.
So it's not about finding the one right way.
Right.
It's about constantly experimenting and finding what works best for us in each season of our lives.
Exactly. Self-discipline is a journey, not a destination.
Well said.
Huh.
And speaking of journeys, we're about to embark on the next leg of ours, where we'll explore even more practical strategies for mastering self-discipline. But for now, take some time to reflect on those 6 sources of influence in your own life. See if you can identify any areas where those influences might be working against you, and start brainstorming some ways to shift them in your favor. We'll be back soon with even more insights and tools to help you level up your self-discipline game. All right, welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into the science of self-discipline.
Yeah.
We covered so much good stuff so far, from the brain science to those sneaky discipline drainers to the power of, setting up the right environment.
Yeah, we've been through a lot.
But I'm ready for some really practical stuff now.
Okay.
What are some actionable strategies we can actually use to, boost our willpower and make those discipline choices more consistently?
Well, one technique that I really like is called temptation bundling. This is a really clever strategy that leverages the power of instant gratification to help you stick with those less enjoyable but important tasks.
Okay. I'm intrigued. Tell me more. How does it work?
It's actually surprisingly simple. You pair something you want to do with something you need to do.
So it's like rewarding yourself for doing the things you'd rather avoid.
Yes, but the reward is built into the activity itself.
Okay.
For example, let's say you love listening to podcasts, but you struggle to make time for exercise.
Oh, that's me all over. I'm always finding excuses to skip the gym.
Well, with temptation bundling, you only allow yourself to listen to your favorite podcasts while exercising.
So I'm turning my workout into a guilt-free podcast session.
Exactly.
I like the sound of that.
You're tapping into that instant gratification to make the less enjoyable activity more appealing.
And I bet that makes it way more likely that I'll actually follow through with my workout plan.
Precisely. And the beauty of this strategy is that it works for all sorts of tasks. Maybe you only allow yourself to watch your favorite TV show while folding laundry. Oh, or you only indulge in that delicious latte while working on that challenging project.
It's like tricking yourself into doing the things you need to do.
In a way, yes, but it's a positive kind of trick. You're using your own psychology to your advantage.
Okay, I'm definitely adding temptation bundling to my self-discipline toolkit.
Good.
What else can we do to outsmart our impulsive selves?
Another effective strategy is creating what the book calls pre-commitments.
Yeah.
This is about making decisions in advance when your willpower is strong to prevent those moments of weakness later on.
So it's like setting up safeguards to protect ourselves from, those impulsive decisions.
Exactly. For example, let's say, you tend to overspend when you go shopping.
Oh, I know that feeling. I walk into the store for one thing and come out with a whole bag full of things I didn't even know I needed.
Right. A pre-commitment in that situation could be setting a budget before you even step foot in the store, or leaving your credit cards at home and only bringing cash.
So I'm limiting my options in advance to prevent those impulse buys.
Precisely. Or maybe you struggle to stick to your meal plan when you're eating out.
Ugh, restaurants are my downfall. Those menus are designed to tempt you.
I know. In that case, a pre-commitment could be deciding what you're going to order before you even arrive at the restaurant.
No.
That way you're not swayed by, those decadent dessert descriptions or whatever specials the waiter's recommending.
So I'm basically taking the decision-making out of the equation in the moment when my willpower is likely to be weaker.
Exactly. It's about setting yourself up for success by anticipating those moments of temptation and planning ahead.
I like it. These pre-commitments sound like a powerful way to stay on track.
They can be.
What's another technique we can use to boost our willpower?
This one's all about cultivating what the book calls an implementation intention.
Okay.
It's about moving beyond vague goals and creating a specific plan of action.
Yeah, because just saying, I want to be more productive, isn't very helpful, is it?
Not really. An implementation intention is a concrete if-then statement that outlines exactly when, where, and how you're going to take action.
Oh, okay. Can you give me an example?
Sure. Instead of just saying, I want to write more, you might say, if it's 7 a.m. on a Tuesday, then I will sit down at my desk and write for 1 hour.
So I'm removing the decision-making in the moment and creating a clear plan to follow.
Exactly.
Yeah.
By doing that, you're conserving your willpower and making it much more likely that you'll actually follow through.
It's like automating the process.
In a way, yes.
Oh,
You're pre-programming your brain to take action, even when you might not feel like it.
yeah, and I imagine that can be especially helpful when it comes to those tasks, that we tend to procrastinate on.
Precisely. Implementation intentions have been shown to be very effective for overcoming procrastination.
Right. Implementation intentions are going on my list of self-discipline must-haves.
Good.
But before we wrap up, I want to touch on the role of mindset in all of this.
Okay.
It seems like our, beliefs and attitudes can have a big impact on our ability to master self-discipline.
Absolutely. The book talks about embracing what it calls a growth mindset,
Okay.
which is the belief that our abilities are not fixed, but can be developed through effort and learning.
So instead of thinking, I'm just not a disciplined person, someone with a growth mindset would believe that they can become more disciplined.
Exactly. It's about seeing challenges as opportunities for growth rather than, evidence of our limitations.
So if I face a setback, I don't see it as a failure,
Right.
but as a chance to learn and improve.
That's the idea. And this shift in perspective can be incredibly empowering.
Yeah, because if we believe that we can change and improve, we're more likely to keep putting in the effort even when it's tough.
Precisely. A growth mindset fuels our resilience and helps us bounce back from setbacks.
Well, this has been such an awesome deep dive into the science of self-discipline.
It has.
We've uncovered so much valuable information
We-
from, understanding the brain science to creating that supportive environment to embracing a growth mindset. We've explored a whole range of tools and techniques to help us, become more disciplined versions of ourselves.
We have, and it's really all about finding what works for you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest takeaway for me is that self-discipline is not about being perfect.
Right.
It's about progress, not perfection.
Absolutely.
It's about continually learning, growing, and experimenting to find what works best for you.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
So keep that in mind as you, continue on your self-discipline journey.
Yeah.
Be kind to yourself, celebrate your wins, and, just keep striving to become that most disciplined version of yourself. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll catch you next time.
See you then?
Thank you for joining us at Wisdom House, where we bring you timeless insights from the greatest books. If you found this deep dive valuable, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Wisdom House. Stay curious, stay inspired, and we'll see you in the next video.